What would you do if your child walked into a bank to open her first account and walked out in handcuffs just for looking like she didn't belong? Let me take you back to the moment where a simple white envelope exposed something ugly and nearly destroyed one woman's entire career. It was just past 2 p.m. on a bright Tuesday afternoon when 13-year-old Alyssa Carter stepped off the city bus. She wasn't texting. She wasn't on a call. Her entire focus was on the thick white envelope she held in her hands. Inside that envelope was exactly $850 in cash, a mixture of birthday gifts, savings from chores, and academic rewards. Alyssa had spent months collecting that money, and today was the day she'd finally do something she had begged her mother to allow: open her very first checking account. For Alyssa, this wasn't just about money. It was about independence, a small, proud step into adulthood. She walked confidently into the Civic Trust Bank, a sleek building with glass walls and gold-trimmed signage. She had done everything right. She brought her school ID from Westbridge Academy, her birth certificate, even a savings record from a children's bank program she'd participated in for 3 years. What she didn't bring, what she never thought she'd need, was protection from bias. Alyssa approached the front counter with a hopeful smile. The teller, Lindsay Harper, looked up from her desk, then paused. Her eyes scanned the uniform, then the girl's brown skin, then the envelope. "What do you want?" Lindsay asked curtly. Alyssa's smile didn't falter. "Hi, I'd like to open my first checking account. I have all my documents here and—" Lindsay cut her off. "This isn't a charity bank. Where'd you get that kind of money?" Alyssa was startled. "It's from my birthday and some savings. I've been planning this for months." "Planning what? Fraud?" Lindsay snorted. "A kid like you walking in here with $850 cash? I've worked here long enough to smell a scam." Let's pause. Quick fact: a 2023 report by the Racial Equity and Banking Coalition showed that Black teens are 3.7 times more likely to be accused of fraud during solo transactions over $500, regardless of documentation. That statistic? Alyssa just became part of it. "Can I speak with the manager?" Alyssa asked softly, voice starting to crack. "You'll get your manager," Lindsay said, already dialing. That's when Carla Whitman entered the scene. Branch manager, polished blazer, and 20 years of banking experience. She approached with the authority of someone who assumed she was about to handle trouble. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She went straight for the envelope. "Where did you get this money?" Carla asked coldly. Alyssa repeated what she'd said before. "It's birthday money, and I've saved for years. I want to open an account and keep it safe." Carla scoffed. "Sure, because grandmothers give out hundreds in cash to middle schoolers." "I can show you the card," Alyssa offered, pulling out a handwritten birthday note. "She writes me every year. I'm not interested in forged cards." Carla leaned closer. "You think you can trick us?" Alyssa's hands trembled. "Please, just call my mom. She's a customer here. Her name is Nicole Carter." But Carla had already made up her mind. "I'm calling the police," she said, loudly, in front of a half-dozen customers. Across town, 42 floors above the city, Dr. Nicole Carter sat at the head of a glass conference table inside a high-rise boardroom. She was discussing market expansion strategies with regional investors, surrounded by financial charts and executives in tailored suits. Nicole Carter wasn't just a successful CEO. She was the majority shareholder of Civic Trust Bank, the very bank where her daughter was being humiliated. But no one in that boardroom knew that yet, not even Nicole, until her phone buzzed. It was a message from her daughter. "Mom, they won't let me call you. The manager says I stole the money. They're calling the cops. I'm scared." Nicole froze. A silence fell across the boardroom as her eyes scanned the message. In the span of 5 seconds, her expression changed. From calm executive to something colder, sharper. Without a word, she stood. She grabbed her phone. She looked at the stunned boardroom. "Meeting's over," she said quietly. "Someone just made a very, very expensive mistake." Meanwhile, back at the bank, 2 officers had already arrived. They didn't ask for her ID. They didn't review her documents. They didn't ask to call a parent. They looked at the envelope. They looked at Alyssa. And they assumed guilt. You're being detained on suspicion of financial fraud, Officer Matthews said, pulling out handcuffs. I didn't do anything, Alyssa cried. Please look at my papers. My mom is Nicole Carter. Enough, said the second officer, guiding her by the arm. We hear this story every day. Around them, customers started whispering. Some looked shocked. A few pulled out phones to record, but no one stopped it. Alyssa, hands cuffed behind her back, was let out of the same bank her family had funded for generations. Narrator reflection. At this point, Alyssa had done everything by the book. She had the documents, she had the money, she even had a polite attitude, but she didn't have what they wanted, the appearance of legitimacy. And for some people, that appearance has nothing to do with paperwork. It has everything to do with race. Let me ask you this. If Alyssa had been white, would they have called the police in 3 minutes? Would she have walked out in handcuffs? Cash carried $850. Time from arrival to police call, under 4 minutes. Number of documents provided, 4. Number reviewed by staff, 0. Time she asked to call her mother, 3. Times she was allowed, none. A child walked into a bank with pride in her heart. She walked out in handcuffs. But what none of them knew was this. Her mother wasn't just a bank customer. She owned the bank, and she was already on her way. What happens when the bank calls the cops on a child without realizing her mother signs their paychecks? Let's find out what unfolded next, when silence met the woman behind the silence's biggest paycheck. Nicole Carter didn't run. She didn't have to. Her silence in the elevator said more than shouting ever could. One hand held her phone, the other clenched her car keys. As the elevator descended, her driver was already outside. The black Bentley pulled up just as she stepped through the glass lobby of her office tower. No words were exchanged. Everyone understood. Something had happened to her daughter, and that was enough to bring down entire institutions. Inside the bank, Alyssa Carter was still sitting in a holding chair near the teller stations. Wrists sore from the cuffs, eyes raw from crying. The police had backed off slightly after seeing how young she truly was, but they hadn't apologized. The officers, Matthews and Ruiz, stood at the counter with Carla Whitman, the branch manager, who was already drafting a statement for attempted fraudulent activity by a minor. No one had checked her ID. No one had called her parent. No one thought they needed to, because in their minds this was just another urban girl with a pocket full of suspicious cash. But outside the bank, everything was about to change. At exactly 2:39 p.m., a black Bentley with government-grade tint rolled up to the curb. The license plate didn't say much, just NC Exec. But in financial circles, it was a whisper heard loud and clear. Out stepped Dr. Nicole Carter, wearing a navy blue power suit and a calm, focused rage that could turn a boardroom into a battlefield. Behind her was David Tran, her personal attorney, whose expression gave away nothing, except that he was already building a legal case in his mind. And next to him, Julian Miles, former NYPD, now head of security for Carter Holdings. The three of them walked toward the doors of Civic Trust Bank without breaking stride. The marble floor inside barely had time to echo before Nicole was standing at the center of the lobby, and every conversation stopped. Carla Whitman saw her, but she didn't recognize her. Not yet. "Excuse me, ma'am," Carla said, stepping forward. "We're currently handling an incident. If you're here for a transaction—" Nicole cut her off, voice low and devastating. "I'm not here for a transaction. I'm here for my daughter." The officers turned. Alyssa looked up, relief washing across her face so suddenly she nearly sobbed. Carla blinked. "Wait, your daughter?" Nicole reached into her bag and slowly, deliberately, placed a card on the counter in front of her. It was thick, matte black, with gold embossed lettering. Dr. Nicole Carter, CEO. Carter Holdings majority stakeholder. Civic Trust Bank. The room shifted, like the air pressure had dropped. Customers nearby fell silent. Staff leaned out of their offices. Even Officer Matthews looked uneasy. Carla, suddenly pale, picked up the card with trembling fingers. She read it once, then again. But the words didn't change. "You own the bank?" Nicole didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. You racially profiled my 13-year-old daughter. You denied her service. You accused her of theft. You called the police without verifying her identity. You handcuffed her. I, I didn't know, Carla began. No, you didn't, Nicole replied, because you didn't bother to ask. You assumed, based on her skin, based on her age, based on a story you've told yourself 100 times, and you decided my daughter fit the villain. Let's pause again. According to a 2021 study by the Urban Finance Initiative, Black minors in financial institutions are 6.1 times more likely to have their transactions questioned than their white peers, and are almost never accompanied by an apology, even when they're proven right. The data is real, but for Nicole, this wasn't just a report. This was her child. Back at the counter, the police officers began to shift uncomfortably. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Officer Ruiz muttered. Misunderstanding? Nicole turned toward him, eyes sharp. Did either of you ask to see her school ID? Matthews shook his head. Did you contact her emergency contact? Ruiz glanced at Carla, then back at Nicole. We were told she was uncooperative. She's 13, Nicole snapped. She was polite. She had every document. She asked 3 times to call me, and instead you put her in cuffs. No one spoke, because at that moment, no one could. And then someone else entered the bank, breathless. Mr. Howard Sinclair, regional director and one of the few people with enough rank to speak directly to Nicole on business terms, hurried into the lobby with his assistant 2 steps behind him. Dr. Carter, he began, loosening his tie. I came as soon as I heard. Nicole turned to face him. Howard, your staff failed me, not just as a client, as a mother, and as someone who trusted this bank with her family's name. We will investigate immediately. No, Nicole said coldly. You will terminate her today. If not, I will. Carla stood frozen, face drained of color. Narrator's reflection. I've seen a lot of power plays in corporate America, but nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to a parent fighting for their child. Nicole didn't yell. She didn't threaten lawsuits. She didn't have to, because when the truth is on your side, silence becomes your loudest weapon. As Carla stammered, trying to salvage her job, David Tran, Nicole's attorney, spoke for the first time. Miss Whitman, please be advised that Dr. Carter's legal team is preparing a formal civil complaint for racial discrimination, unlawful detainment of a minor, and public defamation. Carla's knees visibly buckled. Additionally, he continued, you are to have no contact with Alyssa Carter. Effective immediately, your employment is under review. Howard nodded stiffly. Security will escort Miss Whitman out. 2 security guards appeared beside her, expressionless. Carla looked around the bank one last time, realizing that not only had she lost her job, but she had humiliated the child of the very person who signed her paycheck. And that, my friends, is what we call poetic justice. A lot of people talk about knowing your worth, but this was something else. This was about a child being denied dignity, and a mother reminding the world that power doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears heels, silence, and a name on the deed. And in the span of one afternoon, a simple trip to the bank turned into a masterclass on what happens when ignorance underestimates quiet power. The moment Carla Whitman was escorted out of the Civic Trust Bank building, the atmosphere inside shifted. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was the silence that lingers after a storm, when people realize something serious has just happened, but they're not sure what to do next. Alyssa was finally allowed to stand, her wrists marked red from the handcuffs. Nicole reached for her daughter, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, gently helping her fix her school blazer. There was no dramatic reunion, no tears, just quiet rage and a mother's firm presence. The kind that says, you're safe now, but they're not. Outside the building, word spread quickly. Staff who had seen the confrontation began texting coworkers. Someone had posted a video snippet on social media. Just a blurry moment of Nicole calmly confronting the police and handing over her business card. But it was enough. Within hours, the story began trending. Not because it was rare, but because it was finally being seen. Inside the regional offices of Civic Trust, emergency meetings were held. Phones rang nonstop. Reporters were already calling for statements. Board members who hadn't paid attention to local branch operations in years suddenly wanted daily updates. And all of them knew, if Nicole Carter chose to go public, the entire institution would be in the headlines by morning. But she didn't. Not right away. She went home. The car ride with Alyssa was quiet at first. The city lights passed by the window as Alyssa stared at her hands, still trembling slightly. She hadn't said a word since they left the bank. She didn't have to. Halfway home, Nicole pulled the car over and turned to face her daughter. "What happened today," she said gently, "was not your fault." Alyssa nodded slowly but didn't look up. "I tried to do everything right," she whispered. "I brought my ID. I spoke politely. I just wanted to open an account." Nicole's heart clenched. "I know. I didn't even know why they hated me," Alyssa said, her voice cracking, "until I saw their faces when I said your name." That moment broke something in Nicole, because she realized that for 13 years, she'd tried to shelter her daughter from the world she had fought to rise above. A world where your money could protect you from many things, but not always from the way people choose to see you. She took Alyssa's hand. "You were never the problem," she said. "The system was." That night, Nicole didn't sleep. Instead, she stayed up reviewing footage from the bank's internal cameras, forwarded to her by the regional director. She watched as her daughter entered, smiling, documents ready. She watched how quickly the teller grew hostile, how fast Carla dismissed Alyssa's attempts to explain, and she watched how the police responded, not with caution, but with assumption. The next morning, Nicole made a decision, not just as a mother, but as a stakeholder. She returned to the bank, this time not as a furious parent, but as an executive with the full authority of her position. She stood before the remaining staff of Civic Trust, called them into the main lobby and spoke. She didn't shout. She didn't blame every employee, but her words cut deeper than any accusation. "My daughter believed she would be treated with fairness," she began. "She believed professionalism was blind, but instead she was given suspicion. And worse, she was denied dignity, not because of anything she did, but because of what others saw when they looked at her." She paused. What happened wasn't just a mistake. It was the result of silent policies, unspoken biases, and people too comfortable thinking it would never catch up to them. Well, it did. Her speech was recorded by a staff member and quickly circulated online. Millions watched as she spoke about how institutions must not only apologize when they're caught, but actively protect the people they serve before damage is done. She announced a full internal audit, the launch of a youth-focused customer care program, and mandatory bias training across all branches. But most of all, she promised this: no other child should walk into a bank and be treated like a criminal for trying to grow up responsibly. The consequences came fast. Carla's dismissal became national news. Her name, once associated with rising management potential, became an example used in industry training seminars about implicit bias and reputational loss. No bank would touch her resume. Her career, built over 2 decades, ended in 2 hours. The police department faced scrutiny too. Body camera footage revealed that neither officer had attempted to verify Alyssa's identity before detaining her. Community leaders called for reform. Nicole never pressed criminal charges, but she demanded change, and the city responded. Officers were reassigned. Policies for detaining minors were rewritten. Mandatory training on racial sensitivity was quietly funded through Nicole's own charitable foundation without her name attached. Alyssa, meanwhile, returned to school a different girl, not broken, wiser. She had lived through something most kids her age only read about in textbooks. But instead of letting it make her smaller, it made her stronger. She joined a youth advocacy group. She spoke to younger students about their rights. She even led a campaign to make local banks post clearer policies for teen clients. Something so basic, yet never done until now. The bank that had tried to humiliate her, it redesigned its customer experience entirely. They created a department called Civic Youth, staffed with trained specialists who were there to support first-time account holders under 18. No more assumptions, no more dismissals, just service. And Nicole? She never gave another public speech about it. She let her daughter's strength, and in the structural changes that followed, speak for her. In the end, the most powerful statement she made wasn't in the bank lobby. It was in how she responded, without vengeance, without noise, just purpose. So the next time you see a child trying to do something responsible, opening an account, asking a question, stepping into a space they've never been, ask yourself what they'll remember most, the outcome or how they were treated. For Alyssa, she'll remember both. And so will everyone who watched what happened when a system failed a child. And that child just happened to be the daughter of the woman who owned the system.